for you, but like some of you said, it's always good to have that refresher just to know what the environmental rating scales are. Okay? So here is the environmental rating scales family. Okay? It's been revised 2 times. Okay? So we are actually looking at the first one. So there used to be just an ITERS and ECHRS. ITERS and ECHRS. Okay? Then they revised it. So they don't even use that first edition of ITERS and ECHRS anymore. Okay? It's now revised. So you're going to see that R, which means revised. Okay? So, and this is it right here. Okay? The ITERS R is for birth to 2.5. So birth to 30 months is what the ITERS is. Okay? They've come out with a 3rd edition, which is called the ITERS 3. And it is for children, infants, and toddlers up to 36 months of age. So you're going to see a little bit of a difference here now. Okay? That now the ITERS 3 is all the way up to right at 3 years old. Okay? And this is ITERS 3. So you can tell the difference in the way it's bound. So the R is on the side, and the newest one is at the top. Okay? All stars is the environmental rating scale. One of the things that they use to, if you're going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 star, okay, and you guys are going to be going through that this year, but the Kentucky's All Stars is still not using ITERS 3, okay? They are still using ITERS R. And one of the reasons is because it is a new version, and you have to be trained. Okay, you have to meet what's called reliability. And so any person that comes in to do this scale and rate your classroom has to attend training and be reliable. So they have to take a test, and so it's a pretty tough test. I've done it several times, and you got to get a 85% or higher on it, I think is what it is. But anyhow, those are the 2 4. But again, we're going to be focusing on ITERS R this morning. Okay? So those are the 2, and you are welcome to look at these today. And I'm going to tell a little bit about the difference in these a little bit today. So then we have what's called the ITERS R, okay? And that's this one right here. Now there are some states that are still using the ITERS R, okay? Kentucky is not. They have transitioned to ITERS 3, okay? So ITERS R was for children 2.5 to 5 years of age, so you can kind of see they go together. So after 2.5, then the ITERS R took place, okay? But now with ITERS 3 is for children 3 through 5 years old. Here's what you have to think about here. If at least 75% of the children in the group are at least 3 years of age, you have to use this one. Okay? So Ron and I kind of talked about that a little bit.
Amy's class is the one, we just don't know when they're going to come. So you're the class we're going to have to really look at.
And that's so hard because there's a big difference, guys, in ITERS and ECHRS. Because you're going to see today, ITERS starts at birth, okay? 6 weeks, because we know children can come to child care centers at 6 weeks. So you're going to see that there's a big difference there. So when it all starts coming, that's going to be a issue that you guys are going to have to figure out. But that's how you decide, okay, which one you're using by that age. There's also 2 other ones, okay? There's a family, there's an environmental rating scale for families, and it's factors, and it's this one right here, it's green, and there is not a 3rd edition yet for this one. It's still only the revised edition. And then there's SACRS, and SACRS is school age, okay, and it is for children 5 to 12 years of age. So if you're going through All Stars and you have a, after-school program, okay, they will use the environmental rating scale for after school. So that's the family of the environmental rating scales, okay? It can kind of be tricky, as you can see, because once they bring those new additions out, they revise them, you can see how tricky it can be, especially deciding if you're gonna, when they ITERS or ECHRS, if you are right at that point of 2 and 3 year olds, and I know you guys are, so that's a really hard one. And my suggestion would be is to talk to your coach and ask, like, we need to know, like, do you have any idea when you're coming?
Is she willing to?
Well, I think if you tell her, like, here's our problem, like, we've got to know, this classroom has to be prepared for either ITERS or ECHRS, because a big difference when it comes to materials, you're going to see today it's a big difference. More materials, of course, because the older children get, the more materials that they say you should have in the classroom. You don't have to have as many in the classroom if you're focusing on ITERS. So I would just at least tell her your concern there, and, you know, tell her, could you give me an idea so we could look at the children and you could decide which one you think that you would be doing, okay? Now, one thing they might not even pick that classroom, because you know how they only pick when All Stars comes in, they'll pick an infant room, a toddler room, a preschool room, and then if you have after school. So they might not even pick that room if you guys aren't really sure of the age group that, which scale that you want to do, okay? There is also another one, and it's called the Special Link Early Childhood, and it is an inclusion one. So if you would have a child in your classroom that has an identified special needs, they would do this one. Now, All Stars does not do this one, okay? But other states do. But I wanted you just to understand there is also a scale for special needs. There is also another scale for that one. A lot of this one is through interviewing, because some of the things you can't see during that 3-hour observation, and so a lot of it is interviewing when it comes to this scale. Questions I can answer for the environmental rating scale family. Alright, so again, we are focusing on this one right here. And I'll pass it around for you if you want to take a look at it, okay? All right, so the Early Childhood Environmental Rating Scale, okay? What is it? It's internationally recognized because it's evidence-based that when you go through one of these scales, it helps you improve your classroom, because they look at the environment and your interactions. So they're looking at 2 things. They are whatever teacher, adult, is in that classroom during the observation. Everybody is included. They don't just say, if you guys have head teachers and assistant teachers, or a floater has to come in one day. It's everybody whoever's in there. Whatever those interactions are, it's getting recorded that day. Okay, so just because that's not your classroom, if you're in there, then you're getting evaluated. Okay. Enable settings to evaluate their environment and to identify clear steps to improve, because I'm going to talk to you about what the scores are in just a little bit. What's the possibility that you can get? And so the thing about these environmental rating scales is you can get better, okay? You can get better on what you need to do, and I'll explain how that works. An observation provides detailed and objective snapshot on the day of practice within the setting and with several indicators, because there are several sub-skills and items that they look at throughout that observation. And so we like to call it like a snapshot, because again, whatever happens that day is what's getting recorded and evaluated on that scale. The The environmental rating scales are to help guide quality improvement efforts in an early childhood classroom. Okay? In all of my 28 years of being in early childhood, and actually it's been more than that because I taught a couple of years before I came to Moorhead, but I have yet to see a classroom get a perfect score. Well, I don't think anybody should ever get a perfect score because no classroom out there is perfect. Now, have I seen some really high scores? Absolutely. I've done a lot of these environmental rating scales to go in, and I've seen some really high scores, and I've seen some really low scores. Okay? But the thing about it is, it helps you improve your teaching, your interactions, and your environment. Okay? Listen, when you have a question, please just speak up. Okay? Please, if I didn't explain something, if you want more information, just speak up. Okay? What does the infant toddler environmental rating scale, and again, it's called ITERS, that's how they say it. What does it evaluate? So this is what it evaluates. Space and furnishings, personal care routines, listening and talking, language and reasoning. It looks at activities, interactions, program structure, and parent and staff. Okay?
Are you recording?
Yep. All of these are observable in the classroom. The last one is through an interview. Very, very subjective. What you're going to learn this afternoon if you come back, and the reason I want to say this because I know some of you aren't coming back this afternoon, but the new revised, the 3, they have actually taken out the parent and staff. It is no longer one of the subscales, because it's so subjective. Let me give you an example. So one question on there is, do you feel like you get adequate breaks throughout the day? Okay, well, Angie could say yes. Amy could say no. Okay? Because maybe the day before, Amy got like no breaks. Okay? Angie got all her breaks. So yeah, say I'm feeling good about breaks. But Amy's saying no. See how subjective that is? So subjective. Do you feel like you get ample time to prepare your lesson plans during the school day? Rhonda could say absolutely. Lucy could say no. See how subjective? So what the ladies that started these, that created these, they learned that it was very subjective. And it is. It blows my mind when I go do these and I do the parent and staff, I'm blown away. And I can have 4 teachers that I interviewed that day, and I mean, it's like this. Because it's so up and down, and the difference that some teachers say yes and some teachers say no. Maybe you have a teacher that's not very happy where she is, but maybe she wanted to be in one classroom, she got put in another because a teacher that was supposed to come decided the day before she didn't want to do the job anymore. So you've got somebody that's going to be interviewed that's not happy. Well, we know that can be, whoop, if you've got somebody not happy, what can happen? So, very subjective. So, as of right now, the ITERS are, if they choose your classroom, you're still having this one, okay? But if you are at preschool and you go through ITERS 3, this one's been taken away. Okay? And I really like that. I think it was very needed because your score could be really high and could really drastically go low just because of that subscale, how it was rated. And you're going to learn more about rating in this little bit. Inclusive, the scales are suitable in evaluating both inclusive and culturally diverse programs. And you're going to see that in the checklist that you have to have so many books that are diverse. Books that include children with special needs. Now, If in Conseda, Kentucky, we are not doing this one yet, but I feel like in the future, we will do this inclusive one only for special needs. But the scale right now does have several things in it that you do have to evaluate the special needs and diversity in your classroom. Okay. Process quality. The environmental rating scale are designed to assess process quality in early childhood. So what is process quality? Process quality consists of various interactions that go on in a classroom between staff and children. So again, that's what they're going to be looking at. Your interactions within staff and children. Interactions between your colleagues who you work with, the parents, and any other adults that come into your classroom. It could be, what's the guy's name that put the tablecloths on, Rhonda? Mr. Joe. Does he come in your classroom sometimes? Is he ever? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So again, he would be part of the evaluation. Okay, that would be part of the evaluation. Okay. Interactions among children themselves. So seeing how the children interact is something that is looked at in the scales. Interactions children have with the materials in the environment. And today that's what you're going to be doing with that checklist in that folder, is you're going to evaluate the materials in a classroom to see if, first of all, you have enough. Are they developmentally appropriate? Do they meet the needs and differences of the children in your classroom? Also, process quality looks at features in your classroom, such as your space, your schedule, and the materials that support interactions among the children and any adult that comes into the classroom. Okay. So the big thing that you need to remember, okay, is that process quality happens through observation. How do we see all this? Through observing. Okay.
So what are they looking for when they're looking at the interaction with each other?
Just how they play together. Are there enough toys for, so you probably saw you have to have so many toys for this amount of children and then one extra. So are there enough toys to where there's not arguing? Is there enough space in the classroom for children to move around? Are the toys in the classroom developmentally appropriate? Okay. Are you trying to take a preschool classroom and turn it into a toddler classroom? Well, those toys might not be developmentally appropriate. So, you know, are the puzzles 10 to 15 piece puzzles in a toddler classroom? Well, no, they're not supposed to be. So, those puzzles would not be developmentally appropriate. Any other questions? Good question. Any other questions so far?
Well, because of COVID, when they do come, like, I know that we're gonna be allowed to have our material boats back in our dramatic play, but the sand and the water, we're not allowed to have any, are we?
Yeah, all restrictions have been lifted.
That's all, okay.
All restrictions
Because
were
if they come
lifted.
in and now, I haven't got it ready for that.
All
I mean,
restrictions. But sand and water, is 18 months and older, to have sand and water. But all restrictions have now been lifted. Now, I don't know, tomorrow it could change, like, I don't know.
It's looking like it's.
Like, it could change. And honestly, I don't know how they would be able to come in and do a scale if there was restrictions.
Yeah.
Like, they couldn't because it wouldn't be accurate. Like, we know that all direct clothing had to be removed, all stuffed animals had to be removed. What else had to be removed?
Everything in this
Everything sensory. So there would be no way that a rater could come in if we have any restrictions. So as of right now, no restrictions. Yeah. So we'll cross our fingers on that. Good question. Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions? So the creators of the scale said that there are 3 basic needs for quality they are protection of children's health and safety. So safety and healthy is one thing that is looked at in these scales. I teach in all of my classes. Safety is the first thing you have to have, because if you don't have a safe environment, nothing else matters, because you're putting those children in harm. So if you don't have a safe environment, you're not going to do very well on this scale, because that's what they're going to be looking at. Several different ways that they look at that. Healthy is the next one. If you don't have a healthy environment, it's not going to matter. And then we get into learning, but you got to have a safe and healthy environment before anything else. Another basic need that helps with quality care is to build positive relationships with other children and adults that teach them. Remember how that interaction is vital, okay? So much interaction. Well, what if I say the wrong thing? Listen, whenever we get observed, it's tough. I still get observed. I get observed by the dean. And you would think that I have never taught a day in my life when the dean walks in. Like, oh my God, you know? But once I get started, what happens? You just forget about it. You just, hey, I'm going to do what I do every day. Then you forget that they're there. Okay? And then opportunities for stimulation and learning through experiences. And this is where the materials come in. It takes all three for quality care in an early childhood classroom. Well, in all classrooms. So these scales, the environmental rating scales, were based on these three things for quality care. Because the scale has subscales and items that we look at throughout the scale to help with all three of them. All right. How many of you are familiar with the scale and the rating of how it works? Raise your hand. Okay, yeah. So, here's how the scale works. It's a 7-point scale, okay? And you saw when that was coming around, you saw how many pages? This entire book, okay, is looked at in that 3-hour observation. Yeah. So, a lot of times, this is what you're seeing from the rater. It's one of those things that you got to really be able to memorize and listen, be able to talk and write at the same time, because you have to show evidence. So when I'm doing one of these scales, I just can't mark. I have to give evidence why your classroom got the score that they did. I have to show evidence on why, because if a classroom received a score of a 5.2, that director and teacher are going to want to know why I got a 5.2 out of 7. I want to know how I can improve, right? So when they come back next year, you've made those corrections of improvement. Okay? So it's a 7-point scale. It starts from left to right. Okay? Starts with 1 first and goes to 7. Okay? And you saw that in the scale. Okay? So Rhonda's kind of holding it up right there. But left to right. And you saw that there's specific things that they look at in the 1 category, the 3, the 5, and 7. Well, what happened to the 2, 4, and 6? Where are they? I'm going to explain that to help you understand that. So, start with 1. You get 1s, it's not good, because all the parts for 1 are inadequate. What section do you have there, Rhonda?
Helping children use language.
Okay, so I want Rhonda to read the 1s in that item. Go ahead.
Little or no positive response to children's attempts to communicate through gesture, sounds, or words. And then 1.2 is staff often ignore or respond negatively to children's attempts to communicate.
So, if I put yeses in any of those 1s, I stop there. I can't even move on. Okay? That it's not good, okay? Does it happen? Sad to say, guys, but it happens. And I don't even go further. Like, I've already rated that area. I don't even have to go further with anything else because I put a yes in there. You want no's in all of ones. Because read that one again, first one.
Little or no positive response to children's attempts to communicate through gestures, sounds, or words.
So if I put yes in that one, that means I didn't hear any of that. Or nothing, none of that happened. But I want a no in that one. Read the next one.
Staff often ignore or respond negatively to children's attempts to communicate.
So again, you want no's in all of one because one indicates inadequate care. Okay?
I'm gonna get, each class a copy of this. We have the new one for some reason and not this one, so.
Yeah.
You all
Yeah.
can read every single page, you know. But anyway, go ahead.
And I can leave that one until you, get yours in, if everybody,
sure?
yeah,
Okay.
I can leave it, yeah. So, ones, so I would, what was it, language? What's the?
Helping children use language.
So, helping children lose language would be a 1 in there. And a 7 is possible. You see how quickly your score could go down? Okay, so, let's say that I put all no's, because those things did not happen. So that means I can go to the 3 slot. And I'm gonna read the 3 slot, okay? Now, when we do these scales, remember how I said you have to meet the reliability? I'm all over the place, because like, when I first get there, I might hear some language, and I'm gonna write it down real quick. When I first come in, I might not hear that part, so I might have to skip around, and it gets crazy, okay? But that's why you have to meet that reliability before you can be a rater, because you gotta know how to work the scale, okay? When I finish a scale after 3 hours, you should see my notes, like it's pages, because I don't wanna miss anything. I mean, guys, this is your classroom, and this is what they are rating your classroom as. So I wanna give you the best score possible. So I have to write everything down. I've had teachers in the past say, well, can you tape it? No, you can't tape it, okay? It's what happens and it's what I record, okay? I've had other teachers say, wouldn't that be subjective? Like, you doing it, and then what about if somebody else did it? Well, again, it's what happens during the day, and you have to be reliable. You have to meet that reliability to be able to do it, okay? So, I go to 3. Rhonda, read me the first one on 3.
Moderate amount of verbal or nonverbal positive response to children's attempts to communicate throughout the day. Little or no ignoring of children or negative response.
So, okay, she said the word, what was the first word you said?
Moderate.
Moderate. So, okay, I'm feeling good about the word moderate. So I'm gonna mark yes, that I feel like that teacher's doing a good job, okay? So then, she's gonna be able to try to get a 5 then. So read the one straight across for 5.
Staff generally respond in a timely and positive manner to children's attempts to communicate. Example, crying is answered quickly, children's verbal requests are attended to, respond with interest to children's communications during play.
So I'm looking that, hey, a child's crying over there, I'm watching that teacher is, helping another child, but as soon as she gets done, she goes over there. She even says to the child, Tommy, I'm coming, I'm finished setting up with Kelsey. She's letting that child know she's coming. So I'm feeling pretty good about that one too for that teacher, so I'm gonna mark a yes. And then, what about 7?
Staff have many turn-taking conversations with children. Example, imitate infant sounds in a back and forth baby conversation, repeat what toddler says, and then let toddler take another turn at talking.
So, if I'm hearing and I have evidence of that, I'm gonna mark 7. Now, I have to have notes and backup for each one of these on why I gave that classroom a 5 or a 7. So you're gonna see inadequate to 1, minimal, good, and excellent. So where does 2, 4, and 6 fall in? 2, 4, and 6 fall in. All right, so I gave all no's. Then 3, I felt pretty good about that because Rhonda said the word was moderate. Okay, so yes. So I got to 5. And I was feeling like the teachers didn't respond to all children in a timely manner. They had preferences of who they went to first than another child. I just felt like there was some preferences going on there. Okay, so I marked no on this one. Just didn't feel like enough of that was going on. Because I put a no, they're gonna get a 4. Does that make sense now? So, yes, no, yeses. But as soon as I put a no in 3, 5, or 7, we go up 1 number. Okay? So, it didn't happen negative. Nothing negative happened during my observation with language. But I also didn't feel like there was enough communication. Okay? So, I put a no here. I put a no here. They would get a 2. Okay? So that's where 2, 4, and 6 come in. Okay? Questions you have on how it's rated? Each item is rated. Okay? Each one of them is going to get an individual score. So that one right there that Rhonda just said is going to get an individual score. So let's say that teacher got a 4.2, okay? Or 4. All right, what's the next section? What's the next one over?
Using books.
So then, it's gonna be a whole new one, what she gets. And then it's, again, divided by the number to give the average, because it's gonna be an average score. So in one item, I might get a 6. In one item, I might get a 4. In one item, I might get a 2. Then I go back to a 6. Then I might even get a 7. Okay, and then it's all comes to an average score of all of those together. So your average score might be the entire scale of 5.29. Okay, is how it's calculated. Does that make sense? Questions? Ask me questions for that one.
Just to let you know, there are 39 items.
Yes. And I'm gonna tell you all those items next. Okay?
But that's good. More things.
Okay, so are we all good on how it's scored? And how it is an average of all 39 items? Yes.
I guess, we've done this a few times with different people, and correct me if I'm wrong, who's been here, Celine?
I was here. My class was there. I've been here.
I just felt like some of the scores, just one nitpicky little thing could blow the whole thing. And I just, I felt like it would,
You're right.
it was so subjective. And one little flick over here, which may rarely happen, that happened on that day. I'm kind of shot out of the saddle for one little snapshot.
You're right. You're right. And it's what happens during the day. And that's a good point to say. It's a snapshot. The day before, was
Well,
just
I
like
remember
so
saying, I just wish that blankety blank had been here the day before, because it just, not that you want to know when they're coming, because you don't want to be in a performance. I totally get
I
that.
wish they'd do it more than once,
But-
like testing during the year, you get so many
Right.
times, that way they can put it.
Now, a lot of times, the coach will come do a trial. Do they not do that?
Yeah.
Okay, they kind of go through and do the scale before your initial, official one. They'll come through to give you, to give you some heads up on it. Yeah,
And then that would be the same room that they would do.
not necessarily.
Really?
They pick an infant room, a toddler room, a preschool room, and then if you have after school, they pick an after school. Oh yeah, I have a lot of director friends, because I've been in this profession for a long time, and they'll call me after, and they'll be like, I cannot believe the room that they picked, and guys, it's just picking like this.
Yeah.
Like, they literally just pick it out of a hat. Why did
Really?
they pick Kelsey's room? Like,
Really?
I had it
Yeah.
such good. They picked the room that we
'Cause
had
I
just
always
opened
get
up, and so you don't get to pick which room.
Do you really they just pick it out of
Yeah.
a hat? Because every time I'm the one that gets picked out of the hat. So I'm not thinking your hat's right.
I'm the only one in my hat.
I'm the only name in the
We
hat.
just write all your names on them.
All Angie.
Just all Angie. Yep.
Literally, it's
I have
just,
been there, yeah.
If
They
they-
literally people come out.
that's
Yeah.
what they do. Yeah,
Well, our
that's
prayers are all
probably
answered,
it.
then you
Yeah.
can.
So Megan, no Angie put in the hat when they come.
The year they came, it was my first year being lead, Melanie said, who wants to volunteer for a practice run? And I said, I do, because it was my first year being lead, I wanted to learn. Oh, it ended up being the real deal, something happened and there wasn't a practice. So I don't know how that happened, but anyway, I learned a lot from it, you all,
Oh, yeah.
I learned so much from it, so.
But, Lucy has a good point there, because guys, again, it's what happened that day. And you could sit and say to yourself, that has never happened before. Whoever child has never climbed on a cubby before and jumped and been Superman. He has never done that before, and today he chooses to get on top of the cubby and say, I'm Superman, and dives into the pillows. And he never did it again after that.
No,
Yeah.
no, because he had an audience.
So I have a question, and it's kind of piggybacking off of Lucy's, because this happened to me, because Martha Ann and I were the youngest, and so we had to be the ITERS.
Right.
Like, we didn't have a choice, which is fine. But, and it wasn't that year, but, there was a time where, I can't remember, maybe it was a practice run, I don't remember. But like, they came in and they said there was like absolutely no multicultural anything in the classroom, which there was. So how does that work? Like, I can understand if they missed an interaction or communication, but like an actual physical, tangible materials thing, how does that work when like, if you know it's there and they don't mark it, like, are you able to like
That would be
go
something
back
that,
and be like,
that
this was
I would
here.
definitely share with Rhonda, and for Rhonda to talk to your all-stars coach about, say, hey, like, it was here. Like,
Yeah.
they totally missed it. Now, one thing we're gonna talk about is that if you have like this container right here, okay, and we'll say you can't see through it, okay, they're not opening this up because they're going to assume this isn't for children. So unless the lid is like this, they will look in it, because a child, they're gonna assume, cannot open this, especially if it's not clear. And a lot of times, with children, if it's not clear, they're not gonna open it, okay? So if you have a container in your classroom that you want to have counted, you gotta get that lid off, okay? Because they're not going around taking lids off. And you'll read that in the scale that it's not going to count, because the word accessible, and that would not be considered accessible. So, that probably is not what happened, but you've got to make sure that, like, the number of books, if it was books, that books that are hidden, okay, it's not about, you've got to make sure, I go into classrooms sometimes and there's so many books on the bookshelf, like, it is so overwhelming for me, like, my head starts hurting. It's not about tons of books, it's about the quality of books that you have, because you can take in lot of books, okay? But a rater is not gonna sit and go through every single book in your classroom. They wanna see, because we know that books for young children, they should see the cover because they can't read. Books should not be like this and only see the side. You know how when you go to the library, books are like this? Again, that's not, that print rich is what we're looking at. Children need to see the cover of the book, the front of the book, front of the book.
I'm sorry, I don't have a question based on that. So, and I'm just using your example because, you have to have like, was it like 2 books per child?
Yes.
So you're saying they have to, so you can see like the cover,
Yeah.
but also not be like
Well,
tons of books. So how do you display
So
that
I
without
don't
it being?
mean like, so if you have
overwhelming.
like something like this, so like if you have these 2 books right here, and it's like this, that's fine. If they're covering a little bit, but a child has to be able, this is not gonna count, because the child cannot see it. This would count. The child can see enough of it to where they can, do this. So you can have them overlapping, but not to where either it's like this, to where they're only seeing the side, okay?
So I used to store books in like a basket, so those weren't necessarily be counted because
No, they
they're
will count.
stacked.
They will
It
count.
would count as
Yeah.
a number, but I guess if they're, to see the diversity, they have to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I talk about, having books like on the cubby that are like stood up for the children to see. Books in all learning centers. So, if you want to think about books in every learning center for the children, because we don't want to just say, hey, the library is the only place for books. No, books can be all over the classroom for young children.
I do have one story that Celine's gonna remember. We had our Eckers observer in there doing all this stuff, and she's just friendly as can be, and just, doing all this stuff and asking questions. And it was during, the Easter season, and so we had, being a faith-based school, we had Easter books out, and Alice Dearborn was looking through the Easter book, and when the lady looked down, there was a picture of Christ on the cross, and we got the big violent books in classroom. And Alice went, did you know this happened to Jesus?
And that's hard, isn't it? I mean,
It was shocking.
That was a hard one to swallow, that to say you have violent books
Yeah.
in your classroom.
In a faith-based school, there's no way to talk about Jesus dying, it was violent. But no, we got slammed, and Selena, can you believe this?
And that's things that you have to say to yourself, hey, this is what our program is about, and we aren't changing it for this scale, okay? Because, this is who we are, this is our center, this is our school, and so, yeah, so that's hard. Other questions, please ask.
I was just curious, not to set up often, but, we've had children, every classroom has had a child that would, throw tantrums or whatever, and sometimes you learn through process, that maybe the best way to do it is to ignore. So if they're in the classroom and they're looking for interaction, and you're ignoring this child, you're obviously gonna get dinged on that, even though maybe it's the best approach for this child and what they need.
So what you have to remember is we're there 3 hours, okay? So we're gonna see lots of opportunities of your guidance techniques throughout that 3 hours. And so it's gonna be really evident to us if we see that the child does this often, and we see your approach is, when he's calmed down, then I approach.
Can you say something as if, say, Mila Jane, I see that you're upset. I'm going to give you a few moments. When you're ready to come talk with me, and the observer will see that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So it's an acknowledgement, and you would pick Mila Jane. There you go, Lou.
That's probably one of the positive things about when they interview you, that you would get to talk to them about, okay? But again, the creators of the environmental rating scales felt like there was more subjective than objective on that last part for the new scales of 3. So if you're doing ITERS and you do get interviewed, that's part of what you might talk about with them, you know, because there is one, you can look at all the different questions in the book on what they ask you as a staff, what all they ask you, and there is some guidance things there so you would be able to respond.
When the observer comes in the room, do they interact at all with the children, or so they just strictly sit there and record?
Now, I'm not gonna tell you that I ignore children, because I would never, but I'm gonna tell you, some of them, I mean, it is. But I'm gonna tell you something, if a child comes up to me and hands me a book and says, read to me, I'm gonna read it to them. I can't help it. Like, I'm not doing, no, I'm sorry, sir, but I'm just here for observation. Are you kidding me? Like, you're not gonna read a book to me? Like, this lady just said no to me. No. So then what happens is, and it happens, I'll read that book and then I'll get up and I'll move somewhere else. We are all over the room that a lot of times, like, you know, yes, I'll get down on eye level and I'll talk, but a lot of, they really don't want you to do a lot of interaction, and you will. You might get a rater that comes in there and, I mean, literally, they don't talk to you, they don't talk to the children, but I can't do that. I cannot do that.
Then you always have those children that they go right for that person.
Yes.
Because they're new in the room.
And a lot of times, we just know how to transition them over. Why don't you go ask Miss Ronnie to read that book to you? So, you know, we'll kind of try to help them, you know, to find another way. Yeah, good question.
Say, Henry Schultz would get them to talk.
What?
If a person came into the room that didn't want to speak, I have a boy that's going to be in my class this fall that would get them to talk. Like, we call him the counselor. He would go and get them to talk.
All right. So I've already talked about when scoring, you go from left to right. But again, in the ones, it's inadequate. You don't want any ones. Okay. All right. So Kentucky All-Stars. That's when you're going to have the environmental rating scales. Okay. There are 5 levels of the All-Stars. That's a whole nother training for me to explain to you all about the All-Stars and the ratings. If you are not familiar with this, it's kind of like hotels. You know hotels, how there's a star, you know, you want to stay in a 1-star or a 5-star. Okay, it's the same thing with young children. It's the same thing with child care centers, okay? You want to go to a 1-star or you want to try to get to a 5-star, okay? So, levels 1 and 2, actually level 1, guys, is pretty much just paperwork. Okay, that's all that is to be a level 1. Okay, it's just you've completed the paperwork for All-Stars, and you can actually Google Kentucky All-Stars and you can learn all about it. But one of the things to be a level 3, 4, or 5, you have to have the environmental rating skills. So, and there's more to it, like to be an all-star. It's just not about your score on your environmental rating scale. That's just one small part of it, okay? But to be a level 3, you just have to have the skills done, okay? One of the requirements for level 4 is the classrooms that are chosen to go through the scale. They all have to get a minimum of a 4.0 per classroom. So if your infant, toddler, and preschool room were observed, all of those would have to have an overall score of 4 or higher. Remember, 7's possible. Remember how it's an average score. Okay. How many items are there? What Rhonda tell you?
39.
Okay. And then a level 5, those classrooms would have to score a 5 or higher. If they didn't, that would be one reason why you could, one of the things you couldn't be a 5. You couldn't have a 5-star. You could be up a 4-star. Okay. But there's all other kinds of things that you have to to be the levels of all stars. That's just when it comes to the environment ratings. Okay. All right, we need to take a break first before we get into ITERS. Anybody, we need to take a break? I'm fine if we need to take a break. This would be a good time to break, if anybody needs to break. Okay.
That doesn't mean you have to stop.
Let's take a quick 10 minutes break. I guess is that right? Yeah. Okay. And that's how you get an average score. Okay, for each one. You add them all up, all those scores. So if I had a 5, 5, 4, 7, 2, 4, and then I'm going to divide it by 39, it's going to give me my average score for what I got on the scale. These are just important terms that you need to know. And I know that you all don't have infants in here at your school, but you still need to understand the definition and how it separates infants and toddlers. So, infants in the ITERS is defined as children birth to 11 months. Okay? Toddlers are considered 12 months to 30 months.
Where does and I think it was on ITERS and I heard that, like, when they would average the age of the kids, they'd say like 11.2, because you were 1 year, 3 months or something. So where do you fall between the 11 months and 12 months? I mean, what if there's somebody that's 11 and a half months?
Well,
What do they fall under?
If it's less than, it's 11.5, you're gonna be 11. If it's 11.51, it's gonna be 12.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a good question.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, when you have to round up, that's what you think of. When you round up numbers, that's what you're gonna do there. Excellent, great question. All right, so just some things that is important to know. Because you gotta remember, this scale is for birth to 30 months, okay? So, art and block items are scored an NA, and what's NA mean? Yes. When all children are younger than 12 months, okay? So it actually gives you a little leeway, because remember, they're saying that, there's a difference here in an infant and toddler. But if all children are under 12 months, then art and blocks, I just put NA. I don't have to score those. Sand and water items are scored NA if all children are younger than 18 months of age. TV, videos, computers should not be used with children under 12 months of age. Okay. Technically, it's 24 months. Best practices says, and this is totally different because this is what the scale says, but best practices in early childhood says that no child should have screen time before the first 2 years of life. Okay, so that's, and again,
shows until everybody's
and again, I will share this PowerPoint with Rhonda, so if you want to look back at any of these important terms to know. All right, this kind of gets a little crazy, but I think it's important for you to know. If there is only one child in your group who exceeds the age cutoff, okay, remember 0 to 11 and then 12 to 30, and that child is less than 1 month older than the age requirement, then that item is scored in A. Okay? So remember how this right here? Okay, so if I only had one child, okay, above, so all the children in the classroom were 11 months and younger, and I had one that was 13 months, okay, I still wouldn't score this, okay? It has to be more than one. Does that make sense now? Okay. If the child is more than 1 month older than the age cutoff, and there are 2 or more children then the item has to be scored, okay? So if I have all 11 months and 2 13 months, I've got to score all those NA ones because I have 2 or more children that are older than 11 months. Okay? If the item in question must be scored, even if there are plans to move the child to an older group, it's based on that day, right, Lucy? That day. That day, okay? And I hate it because I will do scales sometimes, and I will have a teacher say, this has been the worst day that we have had in months. And I believe, like, I believe it. It was just an off day. An exemption to these rules apply if a child has a disability that is enrolled. So they might be delayed. So that just gives you an example. Questions you have on those terms there? Oh, it's fine. Yeah, come on through. It's okay. It's okay. All right. So some other important terms to know. Accessible. This is what I was just talking about a little while ago with containers. Children can reach and are allowed to use toys, materials, furnishings, or equipment. Toys on open shelves must be within easy reach of the children. Okay? Again, we come in, I'm not opening up containers because that's telling me that's not for the children. Now, if there's a container and the lid's off, absolutely. Okay? No barriers can be present to prevent children from reaching them. Okay? Exactly what I just said. And there's the example. Toys are not considered accessible if they are in containers with lids that the children cannot manage unless staff shows signs that they are regularly made, the toys accessible. So, here's an example. In a classroom that I was in, they had some containers that had lids on them, but as soon as it was free choice time, those lids came off. When free choice time was over, the lids went on.
Would that be like Play-Doh?
Yes, that would be an example. Yes. Okay, so that's an example there. Okay. Again, accessibility is very important, and because like you remember how I told you I take lots of notes, because if someone would call, the director would call and say, "Hey, Courtney Buchanan did this scale. She gave us a 4 in this area of activities. I want to know why." Okay, well then I've got my notes to back it up. I can't remember. Like, I can't remember what I ate last night. Well, let's remember anything else. So that's why, guys, I mean, like, my coworkers and I, my colleagues and I, we take lots of notes, and that's the reason. Because I don't want anybody to ever second guess me on why I scored something, and especially if I scored really, really low. If I score something lower than a 5, I'm going to have lots of notes. If I score higher than a 5, I'll still do notes, but probably not as many. If I score a section a 2 or a 3, I'm going to have a book written. Because I want to have evidence. And I have had, it happened before where they want to know why they scored. This classroom scored a 3.9. Well, I've got to have evidence of why. This average score was a 3.9 out of 7, which isn't very good. Okay. All right. If materials are stored out of reach, they must be placed within children's reach for it to be counted. And again, an example would be free choice time. You've got some materials up on a shelf. Play-Doh is an example. You've got children in your classroom who eat the Play-Doh. But you're going to bring it down and take the lid off, and there's going to be a teacher right there so that doesn't happen. Then that's going to be able to be counted. And again, infants and not mobile and non-mobile. All right. There's also something in the ITERS called much of the day. Okay. How many of you that's been through one substantial portion of the day? Remember what that? You've heard that substantial portion of the day. Well, you'll be glad to know that's been taken out of ITERS 3. Okay. But much of the day is very similar to substantial portion of the day. So, what does much of the day, what does that refer to? This refers to the time materials are accessible to the children. It means most of the time that any child may be awake and able to play, they're accessible to young children, okay?
Jen.
Okay, remember what Jen said in her introduction? She said, I think about from here down because I'm tall. The best way to think about that, okay, if you want to know if things are accessible and at children's eye level, is you get down on your knees. And when this is children's eye level, okay? Now, if you really want to get at children's eye level, for toddlers, you come even down. And you come down like this. And that is, anything above my head would be considered decorations. Because children do not walk around like this. Do you walk around like that? No, children don't either, okay? So, whatever's at their eye level is what they see. That's what I'm counting. What you have up here, I don't even look at because it's decoration. So, you know, if you've got all these awesome pictures of animals, I mean, they're great, multicultural pictures, okay? If they're not at children's eye level, it's not being counted. And that's what you have to think about. So you might say, my gosh, look, I had all this stuff in my classroom. But if it wasn't at eye level, it's not counted.
Sometimes it's hard when your room is so big,
Yes,
because like,
it is.
some of our bulletin boards are so high and
Yeah.
you can't go any better. You know, the radiators underneath it. And
Yeah. And again, some things you can't avoid. Like where you talked about the books about Jesus Christ. Some of that can't be avoided. It's in what happened, and they consider it violent, but we're having those books in there. Okay. Young infants will be on individual schedules, so access must be provided when those children are awake. That's not something you all need to worry about for young infants. If children are prevented from using materials for long periods of time because they are put in confined equipment, then they are not going to get credit for much of the day. So, this scale is very sensitive to confined equipment. And when I talk about confined equipment, and this isn't something you all have to think about, but you never know. It might be in a couple of years they might decide here that you guys want to have infants. You never know. So we're talking about exercisers, swings, bouncers, car seats. Any of that is confined equipment. And if a child is put in that for more than 15 minutes at one time, they are not going to get much of the day. You have no idea how much this happens. Okay?
Is the crib considered confined?
Yes. The only thing, a crib is only allowed to be used when children are sleeping. And they have to be taken out within 5 minutes of waking up. Because, you know how infants are, they might wake up and they've only been in there 20 minutes. And so you're going to kind of observe them for a little bit because they might go back to sleep. But if they don't within that 5 minutes, they've got to come out. Confined equipment is a really, it's a really big problem in our world today. And it is why we are seeing children that have delays in motor development. Okay. Confined equipment should only be used for safety reasons. So, an example in my classes that I give is you are an infant teacher from birth to 1, and you have 6 mobile and 4 non-mobile. That's tricky, and you can have 10 children, okay, with 2 caregivers. So I know I've got to change diapers. It's diaper changing time, and I know my 4 non-mobile. I'm changing a diaper. I've got my colleague's over here, and she's feeding a child. So I know that those 4 infants need to be in some confined equipment for safety. That's the only time they'd be in it. As soon as that, they come out. Okay? But we are. Best practices actually says no confined equipment should be in a classroom. Children should either be held or on the floor. or being fed in a high chair. Because of confined equipment delays motor development, okay? It also delays cognitive development because you can't see around you. If you're laying in a swing, all you're seeing is straight ahead. You can't see what's going on. But when you lay a child down on a blanket or a mat, they can see all over. That's a whole nother class. and listen, you got, that usually gets my blood flowing. That usually gets my blood flowing about confined equipment because of the delays that we are seeing in young children, and it's due to confined equipment. Yeah.
Well, they're also having cranial issues.
Yes.
If they're laying on the back of their heads,
That's right.
they have to be, I had a little boy that had cranial issues. He was in a helmet,
Yes.
for 23 of 24 hours a day. So, you know, you should keep that, man.
All right. Yes, absolutely. Tummy time. And when do you start tummy time? When children can what? Hold their head up.
Hold their head up.
That's when tummy time should be started. Okay. All right. Any questions you have on those important terms? Any questions I can answer for that? Okay. So let's just look at the subscales. I'm just gonna go through these just so you understand. So again, there are 7 subscales. Okay. 7. 6 observable. Okay. So within the subscales are the 39 items that we look at. Okay. So let's look at each one of them. What are they for space and furnishing? We look at the indoor space. We look at furniture for routine care and play. What's routine care?
Diaper changing tables.
Cribs, washing hands. Provisions for relaxation and comfort. You know, one of the things with COVID is you had to take all of the soft toys out. And so do you see how there's no way you can have a scale done because you have to think about the provisions for relaxation and comfort. So they're looking at how many soft toys that you have in the classroom. Room arrangement. Is your room arrangement developmentally appropriate for the children? Okay. And is it safe? And display for children. That is children's work. Is it displayed around the classroom? And that's what we're going to be looking at when you do your material check. You're going to be looking at that in the classroom. Yeah, and here's what you can think about. When you're looking, you can kind of, oh yeah, when this classroom is good to go, I know that the children's artwork is displayed. So I want you to think about that. If you don't have some things, then I want you to think that, yeah, but when school's rocking and rolling, we got things up. Okay? You can ask a question?
So going off of what we were talking about with, or what you were talking about with the eye level and down, because our bulletin boards are higher than that, a lot of teachers, and I did the same thing, you display the children's artwork on bulletin boards, does that mean that wouldn't have to now what if it starts at eye level and like the artwork?
Oh gosh,
Like,
and I'm gonna support Lucy on this one where she said it can be subjective.
Yeah, so it might be counted by some.
So exactly, and
that's just something we just gotta be like,
well, so here's my suggestion.
but this is our.
I suggest that you have it at children's eye level and you can have more, but you want to think about having as much laminated if you have a laminator, contact paper if you have contact paper, you know, but again, the scale says to be counted, it has to be at children's eye level, and that's because children don't walk around like this. Well, you wouldn't want them to, right? Then safety would be a concern anyway, so, okay?
So you're saying like laminate, construction paper and then use that as your bulletin board?
Yeah.
I mean, like.
Well, that's what I have on I have that on my bulletin board, but it's still, I can't bring it down anymore.
Well, if you run into an issue, if you've gotta have multicultural pictures, you've gotta have artwork, you've gotta have, especially if the shelves have to be low, then you run into doors and windows and whatever, but you've got such limited.
And here's what
space
you have
display
to think
everything you
about.
have to do.
You can put pictures on the back of cubbies, on the side of cubbies, you can put them on doors. And it's just not all pictures, like you've gotta have books, you've gotta have multicultural dolls,
The border on
cooking
mine,
materials.
my border is multicultural, but they can see that part, but it's like anything.
Yep, but is it multicultural, is it cartoon figures on it, is it real?
Well, they're not real, well, they're,
See, if it's cartoon, it won't count. If it's not authentic
Mhm.
pictures, it won't count.
oh,
Has to be authentic.
So with our books and things, as long as they're human, it will count.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
So-
we have to look at those too to make sure you have multicultural books. You can count your music,
Dolls.
you can
Okay.
count your dolls, you can count the food, like if you have a little thing of spaghetti.
Yes,
then
or
the-
sushi or
yeah,
something.
that kind of stuff, that's gonna count.
People for the dollhouses.
People for the dollhouses, yeah. So guys, it's just not pictures, okay? It can be a multitude of things, yeah. And that's one thing you will see, like, you will see your rater come in and go to every area because they are really trying the best they can to give you the highest score possible. They're looking at everything. That's where that accessibility comes in. Because you might say to yourself, well, I have those little people, figures that are multicultural, but did I have them out that day? Or did I take the lid off? That's the kind of stuff you have to think about. And that's the kind of notes we take. Like, I'll write, there are multicultural people in the Block Center, but the lid was not off to give credit.
Clarification on the books with the multicultural. Nonfiction, yes, but would fictional books of like multicultural tales count as well? Like Cinderella has
Now, Cinderella would be considered violent.
No, I'm just using
Oh,
that as
okay.
an example.
Okay.
But like, there's several different, I mean, even just stories that have cartoon pictures, because for children our age, obviously you want the fictional and the illustration. Would those with, various, families either with disabilities or various multiple
Yeah.
families,
Yeah.
fictional stories, would that also be considered
They would count that,
multicultural?
they would.
Well, like I said, but we're, whoever you are, I mean, it has, it's cartoony, but it's real, you can tell,
Yeah.
it's not real pictures, but it's,
Yeah.
anyway,
And,
I had all my favorites.
and you heard what I said when you mentioned Cinderella. You know you cannot have any of those in your
Yeah.
classroom.
Yeah.
Because there is some kind of demon in every single one of them. There is a bad character in every single one of them. So you can't have any of those. Yeah, I mean, think about it, every single one of them, are bad. Yeah, I mean, you've got, Snow
What about
White,
dress up
remember the
and-
witch,
Then our
you've
dress
got
up should just be
Cinderella,
firemen.
the bad stepmother, I mean, every single one
Yeah.
of them, yes.
So would superheroes be considered not appropriate as well, since they are villains and
So,
fighting?
stick to the chef and the firemen and the policemen.
Firefighter, police officer, don't be sexist.
Oh.
That's another thing.
Like this book.
Oh, yeah, that would be fine, yeah.
What is
Yeah.
it?
Whoever you
Oh,
are.
yeah.
And, I'm not picking
Oh,
on you.
no.
So, but, remember, it's not sexist, so when you say, oh, you wanna be a fireman when you grow up? You wanna be a firefighter, you wanna be a police officer, you wanna be a mail carrier, you wanna be a garbage collector. Did I get them all? I think I got them all. Yeah, because we wanna be non-sexist on any of those, because we want children to know that not all men are garbage collectors, not all women are whatever, okay, so, non-sexist.
And with Maisie, you have to have books showing women
Yes.
doing, women and men doing all these things.
Well, and there's a really good book that I've bought that's called Pink is for Boys. And it shows boys like wearing pink and painting with pink and.
All Starting personal care routines, okay? Greeting in the party, meals and snacks, nap time, diapering and toileting, health practices, and safety practices. Now, I don't have enough time, guys, to tell you every single thing that they're looking for, but I will definitely leave my ITERS are with Rhonda for you to look in, okay? What are we looking for in listening and talking? Helping children understand language, helping children use language, and then the use of books, how important books are with young children and making sure we're using books throughout the day. What about activities? Wow, lots of things we look for. We're looking at fine motor, active physical play, art, music and movement, walks, dramatic play. We're looking at sand and water if your children are 18 months and older, nature and science, the use of TV, videos, and computers, and promoting acceptance of diversity. And again, just not diversity of cultures, diversity of special needs, like somebody in a wheelchair, somebody using crutches, wearing glasses, okay, that kind of thing. What are they for interaction? Supervision of play and learning, peer interaction, and staff-child interaction, and discipline. And the word discipline, that's not the word that's appropriate word to use, because we know we don't use punishment or discipline in early childhood. It's not best practices. We use positive guidance, and so, but discipline is still on there. Okay. And then, what are they for program structure? The schedule, free play, group play activities, and provisions for children with disabilities. So, if there's no child in your classroom with any disabilities, that's going to be scored in NA. Okay. So some of these can be NA. Yes.
What is we were just talking about this because we're doing scheduling for like our music and movement and playground and all that. What is the time frame of like that there has to be like isn't there like a thing where there has to be a chunk of free play per day? Is
That's
still
in
a thing?
ITERS, okay?
Okay.
So ITERS is considered that much of the day. So accessibility.
Okay. It doesn't have to be like one
No.
day.
Remember how I talked about substantial portion of the day?
Yes.
That's what you're thinking of.
Okay.
They have actually done away with that I'm going to talk about this afternoon. But you've got to remember, ITERS, it's called much of the day, okay? And that's just accessibility. When children are awake, the material should be accessible to them, okay?
Which means we can't close centers, right?
No, can't close the nurse, right? Okay. What are they for parents and staff? Now remember, this is the one that's the interview one, okay? Provision for parents, and again, I don't like that provision for parents. I think it should say families, because we know that all children are not being raised by their biological mother and father. So I feel like that should say families. Provisions for personal needs of staff. So remember how I mentioned, do you get your breaks on time? Do you have a potty break when you need a potty break? Those kind of things. Provisions for professional needs for staff. So a question that might be asked, do you feel like that your program provides you with developmentally appropriate training, like for today? Like, how do you feel, okay? Yeah, I get all kinds of answers for this one, okay? Because honestly, some teachers prefer online. When it comes to face-to-face, they are mad as fire. Like, they get so mad. Like, no, I want to watch a video and I want my training. Okay? So again, see how subjective that can be? Staff interaction and cooperation. Some things that happen here are getting along with each other. Same one as the next one. Same one as supervision and opportunities for professional growth. Kind of all of those go together when you think about that. If you don't have a good relationship with your director or assistant director, that score can go really down, and everything is confidential. Now, with subscale 7, I can't share anything. I can't share any of that, because if that teacher told me something in confidence, I can't share that with, so if a director wants to know why you scored low on that area, I'm not allowed to share that. It has something to do with the director, assistant director, or even a coworker.
Your bribes will be coming.
I don't know, Rhonda's kind of a dictator.
Probably Christmas, sorry, Christmas, y'all don't get that.
So what I've kind of done here, guys, is I've just come up with some tips. Like, I can't just we would be here for days if I went over every single item to tell you some things to look for. So I've just kind of, in my years of doing these, what are some tips? So children and parents are greeted warmly when arriving, and any information is shared, okay, like how their night was. Because remember, we're talking with infants and toddlers here. If they can't talk for them, we have to have somebody talk. If they can't talk, somebody has to talk for them. Parents are encouraged to come into the classroom and spend time with their child. Now, what that means, and again, of course, we're dealing with COVID, but what that means is that if Angie brings her child in and she, I see it. I don't think you all see this as much as I do at some other places, but Angie opens the door, pushes the child in, and leaves.
No matter if there's a teacher there or not.
That's how it works. Some of you are like, are you kidding me? Yeah, it happens. If you all have ever worked at some other child care centers around, it happens.
Babysitters do it.
Yeah, it
It
happens.
happened when we would come back from field trips. Parents, remember?
I
You
know.
had to tell the parent, don't leave your child if the teachers aren't back yet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we had one year that they I had 6 parents, I was the extended day coordinator, I had 6 parents drop their kids and leave. Bye, see y'all later. And none of the 4-year-old teachers were back. And it was like, oh, well, I guess I'm putting all of y'all in one room.
So anyway, it does happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Departure for each child is well organized, and parents are provided with information about their day. Toddlers are allowed to be on an individual schedule or group schedule, because some toddlers still need an individual schedule. Okay. Simple thing, as infants are held during bottle feeding, that is actually a red in the state of Kentucky. As long as a child has a bottle and is taking a bottle, they have to be held. Okay. And I write that up a lot, even just when I go do my CEA observations that I do. That is something that gets written up, and I actually really talk to a teacher about that. The first year of life is so critical for bonding. And a child who is given their bottle to hold themselves and put in a bouncy chair is not going to develop any type of bonding there. So, as long as the child is taking a bottle, they have to be held. Now, what if the child can hold the bottle themselves? Well, you still have to hold them, and they can hold their own bottle. If a child is holding their bottle themselves after 1 year old, they're ready for a sippy cup. Okay. Teachers talk with the children during mealtime. Again, that communication, remember that language one that Rhonda pulled out? That's important too, talking during mealtime. Infants are placed on their back when sleeping. Now, if an infant can turn over after you place them on their back, you do not have to go back over and turn them over. But you have to put them on their back when you put them in their crib. Children are always supervised during resting. You can see them and hear them. Teachers help children relax before and during rest time. One of the things that is noted is the volume of the music. Like, I go into some classrooms and my head is spinning because the music is so loud. Okay. Whew. No, it needs to be at a volume that is very comfortable for young children. Proper diapering procedures that are adhered to. Teacher staff is always properly supervising play for children, especially routine care. one hand on the infant at all times when they are on a diaper changing table. That might sound like, are you kidding me? It happens. You would not believe the amount of programs that get fined for children falling off of diaper changing tables. Okay? It happens a lot. Teachers talk with infants and toddlers in meaningful ways throughout the day, during play, and during routine. So when a diaper is being changed, now, are they allowed to come if they're still in pull-ups or anything here? Okay. So one thing that we look at is when you're changing a diaper, are you communicating with them? Or is it just one of those, okay, let's get this done, and no communication at all? No, you've got to be talking with the child. Teachers are generally quick to respond in a timely manner if there's any kinds of problems going on in the classroom. Children are read to individually and in small groups throughout the day. Children are never forced to participate in any group activity, but they're encouraged. Okay? So an example there would be you have a child that never will participate. Okay? Never will participate during a circle time. So you stopped asking that child to come on over. Every single time you have circle time, even if he doesn't want to. Tommy, come join us. We're gonna play your favorite song. We're gonna get our wiggles out. Every single time. Children are encouraged to do their own art. Art should not make sense on your walls to adults, but it makes sense to children. So that means that no art should look the same. Teaching staff are flexible and adjust activities because we know with toddlers, you just never know. Teachers initiate singing and playing with musical instruments, but they don't require children to do any of that. They only encourage. Teachers sing. Teachers pretend in a dramatic play area with the children. Teachers use descriptive words when talking with children. So descriptive would mean, okay, if they are, if they put some food out on the table, you're going to describe that food. Oh, we're having spaghetti with some tomato sauce. It looks like I have milk in my cup. It looks like, and even I'm having broccoli with just green. So using those descriptive words with young children. Teachers use everyday events as a basic for learning about nature or science. So like yesterday, for example, I live in Berea, and the thunder was so loud yesterday in Berea, like it shook my house. It was so loud. And so talking with the children about that. Okay, what happens when it thunders? Why does the building shake? So using everyday kind of science with the children. Again, sand and water play is 18 months and older. Teachers do not use television with children 24 months or younger. Teachers limit screen time to 30 minutes a week to children 24 months and up. Teachers support peer-to-peer interaction. Models appropriate social interactions, and that would be having a positive relationship with your coworker in the classroom or anybody else that comes into your classroom. Teachers set a pleasant and relaxed tone when talking and playing with children. So if I use a really loud voice, or if I yell across the room, and then the children do it, and I tell them they need to use an inside voice, but I'm using an outside voice, okay, well, it's kind of hard for children to understand that. Teachers use positive methods of guidance, such as redirection. And then some things for room arrangement. There are separate stores for each child's belongings. Remember that there has to be some kind of physical barrier between children's belongings. They can't touch each other, their backpacks, whatever it is. There has to be something where they're not touching each other. The room furniture is clean and in good repair. We just make sure that's good repair, that the tables are clean, that the lights are all I have light bulbs in them and they're working. No peeling paint on walls, again, all that safety. There is plenty of space for children to play and move. The classroom is not overcrowded with materials and shelving. A cozy, quiet area is separated from a more active area. And then, like we talked about earlier, much of this day, okay, and remember, much of the day is, if children are in any confined equipment, you will get a very low score on much of the day. You would get a 1 for that. All areas are easily supervised. But one thing you want to remember, you should be able to stand in all 4 corners of your classroom and be able to see the children when you're standing. Routine areas for diapering and feeding are conveniently arranged. So if I'm here changing a diaper and that's my classroom, I can see the children. If this is where I'm changing, I've got my back turned to the children, okay, then I'm not seeing them. Again, there's diverse pictures, posters, photographs around the room at children's eye level. There's pictures, familiar pictures, family members, again, at children's eye level. There are at least 3D, either mobile hanging objects for the children to look at. And what is a 3D object? Somebody give me an example. Worlds. Yeah.
Globe.
So it has to have dimensions of height and depth and length, okay, to be able to be considered 3D, okay?
But can it be up high? Even,
Yeah, it can be, yeah, because that's something that, 3D that the children can see when you spin it.
Okay.
There's children's creative artwork, and this is for children 12 months and older. Cribs and mats, cots are at least 36 inches apart when sleeping. And then, always thinking about sanitary conditions when we think about daily. Remember, you have to have a safety and healthy environment before anything else, okay? Electrical outlets are covered, there's no cords for children, cleaning supplies, medicines are out of reach of children. This is one that I do see often. Thumbtacks, push pins in the area of children. So like this bulletin board here. If you have a bulletin board up here, and then you have a learning center down here, if one of those fall, okay, that's going to be a bad safety hazard, okay? So that's what you have to think about there.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
What's the alternative?
The little, it looks like gum, the little gum things. They also have these little sticky.
They're called gum tack.
Is that what comes? Yeah. They also have these other little things they're clear, and they're called little.
I know what you mean.
Glue.
Yeah.
I can't think of their name. That's something that you would use there. Huh?
Glue dots?
Glue dots. Yeah,
Yeah.
glue dots. Yeah. Thank you. Glue dots. Yeah.
Are staples okay?
I wouldn't
No.
recommend that either,
Okay.
because if one comes out and a child puts it in their mouth, yeah.
One time we were told if we did use
Table.
we put tape over it.
Okay.
Over the table.
Mhm.
Do you know if that's true or not?
I wouldn't recommend it, because again, that could be subjective.
I think that's okay for licensing, but maybe.
Oh, okay.
Rugs are secure, that, you know how with rugs, when they start coming up on the ends?
Yeah.
Okay, get that double-sided tape and try to push it back down, because again, that's a safety hazard. Your toys are development appropriate, no choking hazards, no peeling paint. Uncluttered open space where the children are playing when it's their area. And then, again, you need to have space for indoor and outdoor. And of course, you guys got a really good outdoor play area. And then, one thing to think about with blocks, it's not within a walking going out. So you have to think of safety. So if there is a fire in the building, and my block center is right here, and the children have built a train track, okay? So now we've got to maneuver our way out. So your exit areas should be clear paths at all times. And then any modifications for children with disabilities in your classroom. Okay? And then this tool can help you make needed improvements in the quality of activities, experiences, interaction, and instructional during the day. Every teacher possesses the power to transform the quality of life and learning in themselves and in the students at any time. All right, questions? What can I answer? Questions?
I have a question about the TV and video and all that. So, it says on there, none from 24 months and younger. Are you required or is it recommended for older? Because we don't have that.
That is, I absolutely love it when I can put NA on no TV.
I wasn't sure if you got graded on like that.
No, and if you are using, if there are, it needs to be related to your theme of whatever you're doing.
They don't look at it.
Yeah, right, that's okay. But again, I love putting NA when there's no TVs, because guys, we know all children have TVs, and all children sit in front of TVs. So tablets, right, so let's steer them away
But
from
that's
it.
true for computers and that too?
All of that, yeah, any screen time.
If a teacher pulls out their phone to like show a picture, like if a lot of teachers, they'll have pictures of things ready to go, but like what if a spontaneous conversation comes up and they're talking about something that the children just have, or some of them don't have.
Yeah, but that's education, is that, that's fine, it's education, okay, yeah, and I would note that, it's an educational, and you can even look in the scale and it says that, is it educational when any kind of screen time is used, was it educational? Okay.
Yeah, they'll ask like what a book looks like or something. We'll put it up.
Okay, so what we're gonna do, because let's see, we have till 11:30, to look at the scale. So when you go in, how many classrooms do you have that are 30 months and younger?
Well, 3, 2.
Who works with this age? Okay, so you have a room, are
Celine
you
and I have a room.
two are together, okay? Okay, you and Jennifer, and you two are together, okay? so
No,
you
we're
have-
not together,
Oh,
but,
okay.
but,
They
Okay,
got the young, you have the young.
Amy,
so what age do you have?
3 and 4.
Okay, so yours would go for Eckers.
Okay.
Okay, you guys would be Eckers. So what age do you and Jennifer have? So you have twos.
At the youngest, 2.
You have
21.
Okay, so there's 2 classrooms with those. Okay, so here's what you're gonna do. Okay, so I don't care if you get in groups of 2 or 3, okay? And one of you is gonna use your scale that's in there, okay? So pull your scale out. All right. So again, you guys are toddlers, so whenever you see something that's infants, okay, and I know it says up there birth to 12, and again, it's kind of iffy on that, but it's really 11. So you guys are gonna be only doing the toddler part, okay? So you're gonna look at all this, you're gonna go in your classroom. Now, if you don't have something out, but you can kind of remember, then I want you to write that down, because when you come back, I want you to tell me what your findings are. I want you to say, you know what, we're gonna add some more of this. We're gonna add some more of this in our classroom. But you're not going to do anything that's related to infants. So if you look on the next page for fine motor, you're gonna mark that off. And then toddlers. So it says 15 toys for a group of 5 toddlers. So how many are allowed in your classroom? What do you?
Right now it's 10.
Okay, so how many toys is she gonna have to have then? because she has to have 15 for a group of 5. 20, that's right, because it's one additional toy per child, okay? See that? So 20, so she's gonna have to find, now, and guys, these aren't all of it, okay? This is just an idea of some things that you can have. So if you wanna come back and say, hey, we have this in our classroom with this count, with this count, with this count. You're gonna see that for active play, ample materials and equipment so children have access with long periods of time. Of course, you all have a really good playground. So materials that stimulate 7 to 9 different skills. That's what you have to think about, okay? Do we have activities out on our playground for throwing, climbing, jumping, sliding? So you want to think about all of those. Running, okay? And I want you to write those down. 2 types of surfaces. So you probably have grass, and then you'll have mulch or, okay. And then some kind of elements of shade. That can be trees, okay, and that's fine if it's that. And so you're just gonna go through here, and you're gonna see how you guys stack up to the materials, okay? So I have 5 till 11. I'm gonna give you guys about 25 minutes, okay? So let's get back, let's come back in at 11:20. That gives you 25 minutes. And again, one of you will just take the notes, or all of you can take the notes on here. I will give Rhonda a blank one of these, so if you want a blank one from what you've written on, then I'll give her. But go ahead and write on yours, okay? So, I don't care which classroom you go to.
But like I said, we're gonna get them ready, so all my books are in a pile, and like, I'm not, my
So, yeah, and that's what you have to understand, is you guys are getting read about the quality versus the quantity. It's about the quality. We can have materials out, but we can also put materials away and bring new materials out. Because again, it's about the quality of the materials. Because it is overwhelming. Have you ever had a child that goes into something and they just throw everything out? Like, and there's stuff everywhere. It's because it was overstimulating for that child. That child could not concentrate because there was just too much for that child. So again, think about that. The quality over quantity.
Well, especially materials. It's helpful to have less just because
That's right.
if we're expecting them to clean up.
You know, and here's another thing. Less is more.
yeah.
Less
For sure.
is more for children's educational purposes.
Well, and then you have to, like, we were reading down this, and I was thinking, it looks great on paper. And when you're in this room, it depends on the year of the children. It doesn't, you can't just say, this is the way it is. I got a biker last year, fierce biker. I mean, he was a cobra. It happened in seconds. And, I mean, you can laugh, it wasn't funny.
No, it wasn't.
I mean, he was, so I had to make sure that everything was where it worked for him. And like, then he was a runner, so I had to get the runway out, but then I had to keep the quiet area where the quiet area needs to be, in the butt. And it's like, right now, I'm doing it the way it works for this child and for the safety of the other children. If I get dinged for it, then I do, but I'll have to explain why. You know, because it's about keeping them safe. And sometimes that didn't work the way everything on paper says it should be, you know.
And
Or like the bees we talked about.
one thing that's a little different now in ITERS and ITERS, the 3, is, and we'll talk about this afternoon. How many of you are staying this afternoon? Okay. So ITERS 3 is now, yes, you still have to have materials, but now they are looking at how you use the materials. And that is just so important. So it's I might have all these math activities out, but how are they being used? And that's a big part of, they've added 3 math items on there, they've added more language and literacy on there, and it's because you can have a wealth of materials, but how do you use those materials is what we are finding, that some teachers don't know what to do with it. So that's one
Sometimes the children
difference.
teach the, like,
That's right.
they'll start using it for something completely